You're listening to the Two Tongues Podcast. And now your hosts, Kyle and Chris.
Welcome back, one and all, to another episode of the Two Tongues Podcast, where today we have Brian Cranley, as I live and breathe. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back on. Good to be here.
Nice. Yeah, nice to see you. So for those people who don't remember, Brian Cranley is author of The Call of Wonder. We had him on not long ago, and then we had this really kind of fun chat. At least for me, I really enjoyed it. And we were communicating a little bit back and forth, and it turns out we both have a copy of this book by some Frenchman named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Chardin, I don't know how you say it. And we were both told to read it, and neither of us had. And so, we were like, well, why don't we both read it, and then we'll powwow again, and we'll have a conversation about it. And I wasn't 100% sure if that was going to happen because, it's a lot of work to read this whole book. By the time we got through it, it was weeks and weeks, right? So anyway, so here we are. So it must have been a good conversation, enough to reel you back in for a second go.
Heck yeah, I'm excited. This book was kind of one of the closest to my own book that I thought. I haven't read a lot of books that are super similar, but this one kind of is in that same genre. So I enjoyed it. What do you think?
Well, so I'm not really sure where to begin here. I did want to say I made a recommendation to you the other day, or maybe it was earlier today. Philip Goff has a book called Galileo's Error.
Yeah.
And the reason I made that recommendation is because you said this book was maybe the most like the book that you wrote, Call of Wonder. And I think you might, when you read Galileo's Error, you might have similar things to say about that. But just for the audience's sake, Brian's book is about the synthesis of science and religion, or the need for greater communication between these two disciplines. And Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was one of these people. And he even says in this book, my copy is this old paperback from 1965. He says that, and I'm going to butcher this, so I won't get it exactly, but something like we need a new physics. We need a new physic or something like that incorporates the within of things and doesn't just explain the without of things. So if I'm going to say anything critical about it, I'll say when I first picked it up and I started reading like the preface, I was hooked right away. I told you I had like a bunch of notes already. And then the next 200 pages were like, oh my God. I was like, oh, what is going on here? And so here's my take on it. I think because this book is about his sort of model, his evolutionary model. So he's taking the scientific orthodoxy at the time, and he's putting a different spin on it. And there's a name for this type of evolutionary theory. Orthogenesis, I think, is what the word he uses to describe it. Yeah. I had never heard of that. I've heard like people in the Christian realm or religious realm talk about evolution as being directed or something like that. Like, yes, we'll accept evolution as a reality because of the fossil record and because of, cutting edge science and all of this, but we're not willing to let God go out of the equation. We're going to say, yes, it happened this way, but it happened this way because it was directed by a higher power. And so that's what he does. But I think all right. So if you read academic books, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll recap what all the scholars before them said about whatever topic they're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And so I kind of get the feeling that he's doing that in the first big chunk of this book, but I also feel like he's trying to convince the reader that he knows his stuff. He knows all the science from the Big Bang in the development of matter and the organization of matter, all the way to the birth of life, biogenesis as he calls it, and then all the way up to the creation of man. And so I think he wants the reader to know that he knows what he's talking about before he starts laying this speculative stuff on you, which I think was the best part of the book. All this craziness. So that was my impression. The only knock I'll give on him is all of those 200 plus pages of I know all this stuff about evolution and this is how it all played out. I thought it was pretty dry. And then once we get to like the last 100 pages, I was in again. I was completely in again. So how about you?
Well, that's very similar to how I wrote my book. The first half is the history of what all the great thinkers said about the topic before you get to it. And I know this guy was a Jesuit priest and I think a legit paleontologist as a profession. So yeah, he probably knew a lot about evolution at that time. I also found it sort of a slog through the middle. The end is the whole point of the book, though. You can tell, like, that's what he's trying to get to, is his point that almost like a theology of evolution. Where is this whole process heading? And he's got this, end in mind that he wants to present, but he has to get there through explaining all the history and all the science. Although he doesn't go like super deep into the science when he talks about the within of things. I thought it was
Mhm.
interesting. He just kind of leaves it a little bit vague. Hey, there's a within of things. He doesn't say, like, for instance, man has a soul. He just talks about consciousness in general.
Right.
So I thought his approach was interesting, and definitely love the ending. That's where you get his unique take on it. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, 100%. And I noticed as well that he alludes to God a little bit
Mhm.
here and there,
Not
but
much though, huh?
not much. No, in ways that are maybe like poetic. So I have some examples I wrote down here. So he says, the moment the monad acquires the superior spontaneity of a cell, a more complicated pattern appears in the stuff of the universe. So
Mm.
the monad, right? He gives you a little bit of that,
Yeah.
and that pre-Socratic idea of God as a monad.
Yeah.
He also says the consciousness of each of us is evolution looking at itself and reflecting upon itself. And there was something to me, maybe we can get into that. It's maybe not as straightforward, but he also uses the phrase the impetus of the world. And
Yeah.
by that, he seems to mean the impetus of the universe, the cosmos. Like everything that exists has an impetus. And I take that to mean something like a will. And
Yeah.
so if the universe has a will, it's not far away from a conception of God, right? As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And then he says, he uses this phrase, the great stability, and he capitalizes great stability, right? You don't
Mhm.
capitalize something unless you're
No.
trying to wink and nod. He also uses the word the center of centers when he's talking about this, highest consciousness or something, and he capitalizes the first center.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he uses that word omega, right?
Yep.
So he definitely sprinkles in the breadcrumbs as he's going through that we're talking about something that's going to be religious, but I think he beats around the bush because he wants a scientific audience to take him seriously.
Right.
And I think that has everything to do with the point you made, that he was a legit scientist in his own right. He was a
Yeah.
philosopher, but a paleontologist. In fact, let me share my screen.
He referred to himself as a man of science quite a few times, especially towards the end. Did your book have those extra epilogues where he addresses Christianity and then he addresses, like, it sounds like a lot of people had problems with his idea and he's trying to clarify. I found that
Yes.
fascinating as well because it addresses that. What is his conception of God, and how is what he views the universe heading towards as separate from God, or is it God itself, like all of us
Yes.
together? I thought that
Yes.
was fascinating at the end.
Yeah, there's an epilogue and a postscript, and that whole chapter about Christianity at the very, very end.
Mhm.
What year was your version published? The one you
Oh
have?
gosh, I don't know. It's this one right here, "Phenomenon of Man" by Harper Perennial, but I don't know when it was published. Let me see if I can even read it. 1955?
Okay, so mine was 19. My paperback was 1965, but that was after he died, I think.
Yeah, 1955. But he wrote this in what, the 1940s? I think
Yeah,
early 1940s.
yeah. I'm going to pull this up just really quickly because I did want to ask you. I don't know if you can shed any light on this, but I'll tell you, I'm not a Catholic, and I don't. There's a lot of stuff I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not really clear. Like, so clearly, he was a Jesuit priest, but I don't really know the history of the Jesuits or what that means.
Okay.
Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, for sure. So you have a priest that's in a church, like your local priest. That's called a diocesan priest, and that would be like they're all over the world. They take care of the churches, and then you have these religious orders, which are a separate type of priest, like the Franciscans who deal with the poor, the Dominicans who teach, and the Jesuits were founded after Saint Ignatius of Loyola, and they're like a teaching missionary order. So a lot of the Jesuits are known for being highly intellectual. They're also known for straying away from traditional Catholic beliefs, and this guy, I think this book was banned until his death. It wasn't even allowed to be published by the church, at least, because it kind of strays. And we can talk about where it strays from traditional Catholic ideas, but
Oh yeah.
it's fascinating to me. That's kind of why I wanted to read it. Like, what did this guy say that was so crazy? But I don't know. Maybe we should give an overview of the book as a whole and kind of.
Absolutely. I did want to just point out one thing on here on the wiki that I noticed, and like we can get in certainly, and I want to get into what where the theology gets a little weird. But if I just scroll down halfway down this article where it talks about his relationship with the Catholic Church, somewhere there it is, right there. His relationship with the Catholic Church. It does talk about his books being censored, and there's this really interesting. So he goes off to China, as you probably read, because he's doing some research on. They found some of these early, some of the
Hominins.
first, pre-human hominid fossils, the Peking man, and he was there doing actual science. And down here you can see this quote. It says, "Several works of Father Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, some of which were posthumously published, are being edited and are gaining a good deal of success. Prescinding from a judgment about those points that concern the positive sciences, it is sufficiently clear that the above-mentioned works abound in such ambiguities and indeed even serious errors as to offend Catholic doctrine." Okay. So I definitely noticed some of that. And I don't know if I don't really want to jump right into the meat and potatoes, because I really think that would be a good spot to spend some time on. So why don't you give me your summary of the book, and I'll tell you where I maybe, if there's any gaps, anything that I thought was important, I'll plug it in, but you go first.
Okay. Well, just the summary of his overall idea of evolution. He talks about how, like you said, people are evolution contemplating itself. And he believes that all of existence is evolution. And so starting with, I think he called it geogenesis, like the Big Bang and the beginning of the universe. He talks about that development. And then he talks about the first cells and where biogenesis happened, leading up into humanity, where consciousness finally kind of bubbles over and takes over. And then once consciousness appears, now that's what's evolving. And I'd love to get into that more, because it was fascinating how he compared how biological evolution works with how sort of the consciousness evolution works today. And so you have to kind of move past the physical world now. And he's talking about this, the noogenesis, he calls it, like it's almost like the cumulative consciousness of humanity working together and evolving further towards what he calls the omega point, which is, he talks about how the entire universe was evolving, in these infinite ways. But then now, once consciousness comes, it's actually converging back together into this omega point. And what I thought he was trying to do was show really a continuity to everything. Like everything is in the same process. And even though things look disjointed, everything is really going to be one in the end. We're all going to be one. And then he alludes towards God's oneness as the center of centers. And we could talk a lot about that, but I felt like his overall theory is that everything's moving in a continuous motion towards something, almost like the unmoved mover drawing things towards itself. So that's kind of just the overall what I got. I don't know. What do you think? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I echo most of that precisely. So he did say, like, I got this, this feeling that he was describing this evolutionary process as fractal. And if you know what I mean by fractal, so it's happening at it's sort of permeating everything at the smallest level and at the grandest level, and everything is following the same pattern of diversification. He uses this word groping, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. He's like, like nature is reaching out. It's groping around, trying to find a new path that it can take to further itself. And the point he makes is that it's furthering itself in a particular direction. And so you have, modern scientists who will never, and philosophers who will never allow for that. They're going to insist that it's completely random. And it's just by happenstance or coincidence with the law of large numbers and a long enough time, the universe is going to progress in some way. It's going to transform in some way. And De Chardin says, no, it seems to be moving in a certain direction, and everything's doing this. So you can see it. And so the reason I bring up the fractal word is because that image, and I actually recorded a podcast on this book that I'll release kind of in conjunction with this one. So it's going to be my thoughts on it and then our discussion on it. And one of the things that I say in there is, so I go to the gym most days and I do this spinal decompression machine it's a new machine that they brought out. And like, I saw someone do it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll try that out. So you strap your ankles in and then you flip upside down and you just dangle for a while. And I'll kind of like move around and just sort of hang. And while I'm hanging upside down, I'm staring out the window of the gym and I can see the trees in the parking lot, and it's winter. There's no leaves on the trees. So it's just the branches and the trunk. And, and I'm looking at it upside down. So it almost looks like the tree is dangling. It's like just dangling out in space. The point is that the growth pattern of the tree is this example of a fractal. You can zoom in on it and you can't tell without perspective whether you're looking at the trunk of the branches or whether you're looking at some smaller branches, up in the tree somewhere. It's self-similar. It all looks the same regardless of how. And he even makes this illusion. He talks about a diatom shell, which I don't actually know what it is, but he says in the book it's like a diatom shell which has these patterns on it. And the closer you zoom in on those patterns, all you see is new patterns emerging. And so you have this sort of groping. You have this, and regardless of how you look at it, you see this pattern of reaching out and looking for a path. And the reason I think this is so beautiful and interesting is because I've talked about this before, but you probably haven't heard me. I was watching this documentary once upon a time, and it was talking about how they were trying to make a realistic computer-generated landscape. Okay. And they couldn't quite figure out how to do it. And eventually they programmed fractal geometry into the programming. Wow. And it made the mountains look real, the water look real. And so the idea is that there's something about fractal geometry that's actually inherent in nature somehow. It's a part of it. Wow. Yeah. And here's one other little tweak on it, which is, I hope it'll blow your mind. If you haven't seen the Mandelbrot set, you should Google that at some point. But this is a famous fractal geometric image, and it's generated with a formula. And I'm not a mathematician, but I'll tell you, the formula that creates fractal geometry requires feedback. So you have in the equation, you have the solution to the equation that gets fed back in again. So it just continues to feed back in on itself, and that's how it's producing all these infinite patterns and shapes that go on forever. And the point I'm trying to make here is feedback. Remember when De Chardin said that consciousness is, or a human being is evolution becoming conscious of itself, or you might even say consciousness becoming conscious of itself. Yeah. And I can't help but think about that as the same type of feedback. Right. It's the same thing that happens when you focus a camera on a camera, or you put a microphone too close to a speaker. You're getting this process of feedback, and it's tied into this fractal geometry, which we see in nature, which we know now, or at least I suspect is fundamental to nature. And I thought that it just blew the top off of my head. I just thought it was amazing. So I'm rambling, but
I love it. No, I love it. I thought what I liked about his book and his approach is that he respects randomness, which I feel like you have to do if you're going to really talk about evolution, because it does appear random. And he uses that term groping. Evolution is groping, and it's trying all these different, iterations until it finds one that works, ending up in primates that really works the best. But he talks about it almost like it's consciousness itself that's developing. And so when we talk about evolution as this force, and I would say even atheists tend to talk like this, where it just seems like it's looking for something. Evolution as a whole is like looking, but it also looks really random. There's a lot of death and failure in the iterations. But he talks about that. That's like the primal consciousness within life, that it's groping without a consciousness towards consciousness, is trying to get there. And I thought that was a really fascinating. I'm trying to put myself in his shoes and see his ideas on consciousness, because he talks about, evolution's groping. Then you have animals with instincts, and that's like a, sort of a lesser version of consciousness, but it's heading in that direction. And then you end up with humanity. And I don't know. I thought it was cool the way he included randomness, but also gave it sort of a direction and a power. He called it that radial energy. Remember, he talks about the
Yeah.
wheel and how there's
Yep.
a radial energy moving it forward, and there's a tangential energy that moves it sideways into more variation. And I thought that was helpful for me as well, just understanding his idea of evolution as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. He calls groping directed chance. He says
Yeah.
it uses the blind determinism of large numbers with a direction. And,
Yeah.
and whether or not that's true, like whether or not it could be a different way, I don't know. But the truth is, if we accept that things began with the Big Bang and it was all chaos and so forth, whatever the laws of nature are acting upon it has in fact created human beings. The end result is that it has in fact created human beings, and I think that there's like a teleology there that he alludes to. It's like there is what the cosmos does is it creates human beings. Like that, that's what it's done.
Yeah.
And so I did get, when he was talking about the nervous system, I did get this, he's like describing how, and whatever creature, like once life happens, whatever creature you examine, from the simplest and most primitive to the more advanced, they're all following this pattern where they become like increasingly cerebralized, or whatever he said, and the nerve ganglions, he's got all the science behind that he's dropping on it, but that you're getting the same process happening. And the more sophisticated the nervous system becomes, the greater consciousness can be expressed.
Right.
And so he said in a couple of different places that whatever it is driving evolution has always existed. And he says the same thing about consciousness. He said, if it exists in the cosmos, it must have always existed. It must have been a part of it from the beginning somehow.
Yeah.
And where am I going with this, Brian?
Well, he just alludes at God. He doesn't really, he doesn't say God was there and that's what it is. He just he really respects the physical world. And he talks about the nerve ganglions and cerebralization or hominization, like all biology is moving towards hominizing. So I like that he really respects the physical world and doesn't try to separate the two. But I think that's, one of the places where the Catholic Church had an issue with him was not emphasizing like a soul enough. He just talks about the biology and how that leads to consciousness and kind of leaves it there. So it's a little vague, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does get interesting when he starts actually talking about Christianity. So we'll save that for just a bit. But I wanted to illustrate one thing. What we were kind of beating around a little bit was I was talking about the fractal nature and this pattern repeating, and you made mention of how this process of evolution is seen not just in biology but in lots of other things. And he makes a bunch of points about that, like it happens with instincts. So you have the same type of diversification and groping and transformation that happens in biology happening in instincts. And that's weird, because instincts are something that's not quite as physical or as deterministic as a body. It's not responding to the environment in the same way.
Yeah.
Where, we would be forcing these sorts of changes. And he starts talking about ideas. He brings up the idea of an invention. So
yes, I love that part. That's great.
And he even says, he's like, so you start off with something simple, and you branch off and you transform that and become more complicated. And what you notice is when you look at creatures and when you look at instincts, you see the same pattern being followed with ideas. And he uses that example of an invention.
Yeah.
So that's an idea. That's a way of talking about how on different layers, on a psychic layer in the realm of ideas, in the physical layer in the realm of biology, you're seeing the same pattern over and over and over again.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the best points in the whole book, was comparing the groping of biological evolution, where it's trying these different iterations to find one that finally works and moves life forward, and then comparing that to how we create with our consciousness through invention, and I think of Edison with the light bulb, 100 different failed attempts, finally gets the right one. So he's headed in a direction towards, moving, I guess, life forward or consciousness forward. But I loved that was a great example for me of his idea. You do see that pattern playing out, I guess, in humanity today, the same pattern that was in biology before us.
You do, and he, I don't know if he uses the word, maybe he does, but he says something like, once we reach the Neolithic, the human beings have become sophisticated enough that they're adapting. I get, he didn't say it quite like this, but that they're adapting to their environment using their minds. So they're not really transforming biologically, physically as much as their ancestors were. But now evolution starts to work on the within. It starts to, I don't know if he calls it involution. Maybe he does, but
he
that's
did at
sort
the
of
end.
gist.
Yeah,
Okay.
he did
Okay.
at the end. Or I have an epilogue after the Christianity epilogue, and that's all he talked about was involution.
Oh, involution. Okay.
He wrote it 10 years later after he published the book to respond to a lot of his critics. And he did talk about involution as kind of his final idea that he was getting to.
Well, tell me more, because I don't think I have that last chapter.
I'll send it to you. But he was talking about, and he's just so far up there. I don't want to misquote him, but he was talking about involution, and I had to look it up, like a progressing within. I don't know, how would you define involution compared to evolution?
I would say it's the exact same process. Evolution is working on the without, and involution is the same process, but on the realm of consciousness or spirit. It's the internal, the same pattern transformation.
Yeah, and he was questioning whether evolution has stopped in humanity. He's like, we can't even say, because we've been here for such a short time, we can't even say if we're still evolving physically, but we are definitely evolving in our consciousness. And I just kept thinking, man, what would he have said if he knew about AI today and all the places that human thought has gone, where it's almost creating a secondary consciousness. But just fascinating. I don't know.
Well, let's touch on that for a minute, because I know I want to get to this whole Omega idea, and I agree with you that it's hard to conceptualize. It's hard to quite grasp what this culmination is, where he talks about, like I said, consciousness coming back together and having this Omega point. I do want to say, he says, and I wish I could pull a quote out. I probably could find it, but it would take a minute. He says something like, he's talking about the one and the many, this ancient philosophical problem. But he says that the whole key of evolution, if you learn nothing else, understand that the process of the universe is all about the many becoming one and the one becoming many.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to talk about the Omega point. Well,
I want to talk about Omega, and I want to talk about AI, because I think we need to at least bring it up in this day and age when he talks about minds coming together and it being the end of the world in a religious sense. And the Omega point being the culmination of all these minds joining together. Boy, it's hard to argue that large language models aren't something like that. And so, take it away, bro.
You're gonna drop that on me? Okay, I want to talk about my understanding of the Omega point, because it is a difficult concept. I had to reread what he was saying many times. But it sounds like he's talking about biology groping, or geology first, then biology groping. Then he said, once we cross the threshold of consciousness, he said that took one step. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a slow crossing. It was, we crossed it and there's no going back now. And he said that is the whole point of biology, was to reach consciousness. And now that we're there, he talks about now it's switching towards a converging again, like we're coming back together. And he really emphasized at the Omega point, which is the point in the future where everything becomes one, basically, the Alpha and the Omega point. And he's not really talking about God. He's talking about us beings, but he talks about that each person, each consciousness is a person. And he's not talking about some Buddhist idea of we're all a drop in an ocean and we become one and we lose our personality.
Yep.
He said it's a center of individual centers. And so everyone remains an individual, but your consciousness is still united around a center, which he, moves into God at some point. But your consciousness remains personal, it remains individual, but that all the centers come together at the omega point. And he talked about it as like a Superman, like we become Supermen, like Nietzsche was talking about, but
Right.
in a different way. So that's kind of what I thought of the omega point, but I don't know if that's what you got or not.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that whole piece where he's talking about once life happens, it's irreversible from that point on. Once consciousness happens, it's irreversible from that point on. I couldn't help but think of the story in your book about that we talked about the last time about
Yeah.
the first pre-human hominid that becomes self-aware. You know,
Yeah.
It's that irreversible moment. I'll push back a little bit when he says that. First of all, I agree with you that he talks about the center of centers and minds converging to become mind. And he italicizes mind, right? He doesn't capitalize it. So maybe there's something to that. But he does call Omega at some point in the book, God Omega, God hyphen Omega. And so I got the impression that, this is just, I mean, I guess I'm just kind of spill my candy in the lobby as the sales candy. So I think what he's saying is that we're becoming God, that we're manifesting God. We are the process of the universe, if I can put it that way, is leading up towards the incarnation of God. And there's so much incarnation language spread out all over that book. It was one of the most fascinating things to me that he seems to see the universe as an incarnation, as the incarnation. And so maybe that's where the Catholic Church might have had some trouble with him. He's not talking about Christ as the incarnation. He's talking about the universe as the incarnation. And I have evidence to back that up, but what do you make of that?
Yeah, so he addresses this in that last epilogue that people accused him of pantheism.
Yeah.
And pantheism is what the whole universe together is God. Is that what pantheism is? Each thing requires everything together, and that is God, not a separate other God type thing.
Not transcendent, right?
Not transcendent, yeah. So he talked about, in one sense, it is pantheism, that it is the true godlike nature of everything. Once we reach this omega point, we do become like God. But in that little apology at the end, it did sound like God is still somehow other, but we're becoming like him. And it was just not quite clear. And I think that's part of the problem the church had, is it's not clear enough.
Yeah.
And so you can interpret it different ways, but it sounds like from reading the book before you read that ending that we're becoming God, like everything in the universe together is moving towards divinity. You know, that's kind of the idea you get where you feel like he's leading. That's the omega point. But he talked a lot about Christianity. He talked about the incarnation of Jesus in that section on Christianity, which I think you had. And he talked about God becoming matter and how he redeems the rocks. You know, he redeems the geology by becoming matter. He redeems the biology by becoming life. And he redeems consciousness by becoming, I guess, human consciousness as well. So to me, it felt still a little vague, because he said he's Christian. So I'm guessing he believes in Christian dogma to a certain degree. But the book, before he got to that final add-on 10 years later, sounds like we're becoming God at the omega point.
And here's a question for you. Tell me which way you take this.
Yeah.
He does talk about the omega point being this culmination.
Yeah.
But I also got the feeling, and he didn't explicitly say this, but I got the feeling that because he calls it the end of the world, right? And it sounds like he's talking about it in a Christian sort of way. The end of the world, though, just like the end of a phylum, is the beginning of another. Like, to me, I got the feeling that omega may not be the ultimate culmination. It's just like, oh, here's another Big Bang situation. It's going to culminate in something that will continue to go on and carry evolution forward. I don't know. Did you get that sort of feeling at all, or is this striking you as new?
I didn't get the cyclical idea where it's going to start again, but I did get apocalyptic, because he said, when everybody says the word apocalypse or end of the world, everyone thinks catastrophe. And he was trying to say, no, this is like almost like a utopia or a heaven type thing where something is going to keep going on, but it's a new elevated life as, the culmination of where the world is headed. But yeah, it sounded like it was going to keep going after you reach the omega point and some better life. But I'd love to sit down and talk with him and ask him, what does that look like? What does the omega point look like? Talk more about it. But
so when he talks about the person, that point you brought up earlier, I wanted to circle back to that. When he talks about that, like you say, not bleeding into the soup of souls and becoming this monad again that doesn't have, that doesn't preserve your personhood. He's talking about them all coming together. And, I think that maybe that's colored by his religious upbringing and his vocation, or whatever the proper vocabulary is. That the Christian idea is that heaven, if I can put it that way, is one in which we exist. I mean, there's a resurrection of the bodies, and we exist in our person. So we don't go away, even though Jesus says things like when he's praying for mankind that they might be one, Father, as I am in you and you are in me. Mm-hmm. Right. But heaven in a Christian sense is not one where we disappear. We don't become one with God in that way. So I don't know if that was deliberate. I don't know what you make of that.
I think I felt that same history when he was talking about we are individual persons coming together and we don't lose our personhood. Like he wanted to, hey, it's okay. Don't worry. You're not going to lose who you are, or you're not going to forget. But he never addresses human death, really. He doesn't, it doesn't sound like people that died are part of the omega point. It's almost like you have to be alive. He didn't talk about life after death and you're still in this journey of creation. I hope that's what he meant, but I didn't pick up on that. So I don't know. It's still vague to me what he meant at the end. It sounds like he's trying to encourage everybody. You keep your person, you're part of the center somehow, but you're still individual. But he didn't address what happens when you die and if you're part of that journey, you're part of that continuing journey or not.
Right. Yeah. I also felt like it was kind of vague. And I think that partly that's the religious mystery. Like the truth is Chardin doesn't know. And so he kind of has to be vague to some degree. I also want to say this. I don't know if I touched on this when we talked last time, but I'll just tell you, I had a what I call a mystical experience. I had a religious experience, and it was it's like sort of a psychedelically induced mystical experience. And there, we don't have to get into the details, but the point is, it was a life-changing experience for me. But the point I want to make about it is, I had one of these hippy-dippy, one with the universe experiences.
One with everything.
One with everything.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about it. Like, what did it? What was it like?
Okay. So I'll lay it out there for you, Brian. I have done, my fair share of dabbling. I've always had an interest in religion. So this maybe colors my experience. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And I've experienced LSD. I've experienced DMT. These are extremely intense psychedelic drugs, and people tell all sorts of stories about them. And they're 100%. In fact, fractal geometry is the key experience from the DMT experience. It's nothing but fractal geometry. But what I had, the mystical experience that I'm talking about under the influence of, was none of those things. It was MDMA. That's what the kids call ecstasy. Okay. And I've only done it a time or two. But and I've never done that. I've never done any of this, by the way, in any kind of a party way, or these have always been seeking experiences. And so anyway, the reason I bring up MDMA is because it's not a typical psychedelic. It's not a visionary experience. You're not going to do MDMA and see things. Okay. What I did was I laid on the couch and I pulled the blanket up to my chin, and I laid there for hours having this experience. I'm sure my pupils were dilated as big as dimes. And I had this intense internal experience. It was deeply thoughtful. And I literally pulled my phone out and I could barely concentrate on it. And I'm typing in all the stuff I'm feeling and thinking for hours. And I have this pages and pages on my phone that I typed out that I will go back and read periodically, almost like sacred scripture. And that's strange, but it's like reliving this experience. And I could show you at some point, but I even say, as I'm writing this, thank you, God. Thank you, Lord, because it felt like a grace. It felt like I was given a grace. And so the reason I'm telling you about this is because I did feel like my consciousness was expanded to include everything, that I understood religious matters in a way that I never did before. And I guess the gist of this is, even when I was one with the universe, I did not feel as though I had lost myself. I was still myself being one with the universe. So the person was preserved. I still felt as though I was me, even when I was everything. And so there's a line there that connects what Chardin is saying to this, my own personal mystical experience.
I mean, that's exactly what it sounded like he was saying, was you're one with everything, but you're still individual person.
Yes.
So maybe you got a glimpse of the afterlife.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe we could say that for another conversation. We can get really into it, but it's very difficult to talk about because it's very difficult to put into words.
Yeah.
And to try to summarize it for you is like even more difficult. But the takeaways were really just a cosmic unity. It was just understanding that, well, what I felt was, and I say this all the time, this has kind of become my little motto, we are the experience God is having. And so I'll say that periodically on the podcast. And when Chardin says, consciousness experiencing itself, I felt like I was God experiencing myself. I feel that now. I feel like that's the dialogos we're having right now is God talking to itself. So it's colored my entire sense of reality from that point on. And this happened to me in 2019.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, it definitely reminds me of Chardin's book, what he was trying to talk about. And I talk about in my book, one of the ancient philosophers' attributes of God was that he's one, and he's one to such a degree that there's literally no distinction in him. You can't separate his will from his love, from his power. It's all one and the same thing. We don't really know what that means, but when we, I guess, hopefully there's a heaven, we get there, somehow we're one in this oneness with him, but we're individual. So I'm hoping that whole oneness, and Plato talks about, when he talked about love, I can't remember what book it was in, the Symposium, maybe, he talks about people as our souls are two halves of a shape, and we're longing for the other half, for the person you love completes your soul in a sense. So I feel like there is a longing in all of us to be one. And you see it in love, in marriage and family, in desiring to be with someone else. You see it in the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity, where it's three persons, but they're perfectly one. So I feel like that dynamic is written into at least humanity. And hopefully, like I said, if there is a heaven, then that's a fulfillment there, is that we become one. But whatever that looks like, we don't know. But it's got to be awesome when we're finally one with everything, and you don't feel lonely, isolated, separated out anymore,
If my experience that I was trying to describe is any reflection of that, yes, it's awesome. It's going to be awesome. And this really ties into this incarnation theme that I want to talk about, because one of my personal struggles, like the other tongue on the podcast, my buddy Kyle, we've been best friends since we were in kindergarten, so we've known each other forever. And he's a very different kind of personality, which is what makes our conversation so interesting. But he's also become very conservatively religious. He was exploring Eastern Orthodox Christianity for a time, and now he's sort of settled in on Catholicism. And so he's much more conservative than me. He doesn't like any of my hippy dippy ideas when I bring them up, when I push the boundaries of Christianity. So I'll tell you where the theological point that I struggle with, and I still consider myself to be a Christian. I've never changed that state of mind. Is when I had that experience of being one with the universe, I had a very difficult time making a distinction between feeling myself to be an incarnation and hearing that Jesus is the incarnation. So now I had this strange tension between Christ as the only incarnation, when in the back of my mind, I see very much like Chardin does, the cosmos as an incarnation, as the incarnation. So what makes the person of Jesus different from from me or from anybody, right? From anybody or from anything. And it's, I even hesitate. You can see the hesitance to even say it, because I have a little feeling of blasphemy that creeps in the back of my throat when I put it into words. So anyway, I do want to talk about these incarnation motifs, but I'll stop there if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, it doesn't scare me. I love ideas, and I love testing theology and trying to find out, what theology is trying to say. And what I'm thinking of, and my background is Catholic also, but what I'm thinking of is, Jesus is the incarnation where divinity takes on flesh, becomes one of us. But the theology of baptism is that we are baptized into Christ's divinity, and we are quite literally taken up into the Trinity. And we don't become God, but we become divinized to become like God, part of his family. And so I think you should have that sensation of that feeling. A real Christian should have that feeling that you feel like you are literally God's son, or you are one with God, because he's living in you and he's bringing you into that. And that's, the gift that Christ gave us was he redeemed Adam and Eve, but then he took it way further and brought us into the Trinity. So you're now like an adopted son of the Trinity. So you should have that feeling as a Christian.
Well, that actually is comforting to me, Brian, honestly. And, I have like some biblical defenses for this position, and I've done episodes on it, but ultimately when in the book of Genesis, when God is creating Adam, and I heard this said by Alan Watts, who I love. He's such a beautiful speaker. He said this in some one way on a lecture, and he's talking about how the breath of God is breathed into Adam, and he calls it the Ruach Adonai, the Spirit of the Lord is breathed into Adam. I see that as the animating spirit of man being identical to the Spirit of God. I see that as, and even the word breath and the word spirit in ancient languages were always very closely related, because when you die, what happens? You stop breathing. When you're born, you immediately start breathing and crying. So there's this connection between, it's the breath of life, right? That's what they call it. So when God breathes life into Adam, I see that as a literal statement that the Spirit of God is animating the form of man. And then you might say, oh, that's poetic, or it's not literal. And then I read, what is it in Genesis 6, where he says, my soul shall not abide in man forever. God says, my soul shall not abide in man forever. So I literally do think that. I think that what makes us alive and conscious, what consciousness is the thing we mean when we say God. I don't know how to explain that, but that's what I deeply believe.
I don't think that's wrong. I think it is the Spirit of God that was put into Adam, and I think it is the Spirit of God that's in you. And so the distinction I make is you have a soul that's not divine, but you have the divine Spirit within you and bringing you into the life of the Trinity in a way where you're part of it. So it should feel like you're kind of not like you're God, but you are like God, or you're, I blasphemy. I'm thinking like, I can't say you are God, but you have God in you. And it's like close. It's really, really close to it in my mind.
So I have a question for you, and this might not be an appropriate time, or you may not be able to answer, but this is a question that I have. I grew up as a Protestant, okay, or as an evangelical, right? So I don't know the difference between spirit and soul. To me, those words are synonyms, and you just use them as though they were not. And so I'm very curious for an explanation.
No, I'm with you. To me, it's a synonym. Human spirit versus divine spirit, I guess. Soul, spirit. I don't really know the difference there either. I use soul more because spirit it's just so vague to me. It's hard to wrap my mind around what it means. But soul, and then the Holy Spirit, the divine Spirit of God, I would say. But human soul, human spirit, to me is, like you said, it's a synonym in my mind.
Okay, good. All right. So this is what I'm going to do. I want to read to you a couple of just brief statements that were scattered throughout the book that I take to be these sort of incarnation motifs that he's repeating over and over again. So you can tell me what you make of it. Let's see, where is it here? In fact, maybe I'll just put this on the screen so we can read it together. It's not letting me. It's a Word document. Okay. In any case, let me just read it. So, at one point in the book, he says, "It is in and by means of the cell that the molecular world appears in person. The cell has become someone." Right. So this is the molecular world moving on to having that state change, moving on to the next thing. And I can't help but think that the molecular world, the chemical world, the cell becomes a person. The cell becomes someone. There's something in there that sounds like an incarnation. And you're going to see as I read through these that again we have a fractal thing going on where this incarnation is happening at every level.
Yeah,
so
I mean that's what I said in my book too. Real similar.
So he says that. He says, oh well, you already alluded to this one, but he says a universal will to live is harmonized in him. So what a universal will to live is, I don't know, but it's harmonized. It becomes man. That just seems like an incarnation motif. It just sounds like an incarnation to me.
When you say incarnation, do you mean the appearance of a person, of a consciousness, or like a divine God himself coming to into matter?
Yes. Yeah. When he talks about consciousness, I have a very difficult time separating that from God.
Okay.
So consciousness becomes a person in the form of a cell, in the form of a chemical. Each state change is a different type of incarnation, and more sophisticated or centralized, as he says, incarnation. The will to live, a universal will to live, is harmonized in him. Like the universe has a will, and it has something to do with life, and it becomes the flesh, right? I mean, how is that not okay?
Incarnational, yeah.
Exactly. Let me read a couple more. He says, a unity of origin, framework, and dispersed impetus, which together with life's ascent was to center itself under our eyes. Right. So this unity
Poetic.
of right. He has a bunch of those. He says, the living world is constituted by consciousness clothed in flesh and bone. Consciousness clothed in flesh and bone.
Yeah.
A couple more. He says, man discovers that he is nothing else than evolution become conscious of itself. Well, we already talked about that one. He says, are we not at every instant living the experience of a universe whose immensity is gathered up in each one of us?
Oh, unbelievable.
I'm just going to read that one again. Go ahead. Sorry. Are we not at every instance living the experience of a universe whose immensity is gathered up in each one of us? Man.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would say one thing I really liked about him is he brings God into more than just Jesus and man, like a traditional, you raise traditional Christian, whatever it is, Protestant, Catholic, and you think God's image is only in man. But he says, no, God's image is in the entire creation. It's in the rocks. It's in the cell. Like you said, it's an incarnational moment. And what I said in my book was, he's trying to make this one continuous motion towards this omega point. I broke it up a little bit where geogenesis, I said the Big Bang is a moment of creation. The first cell, Luca, he just kind of makes it sound like it just naturally moves into that. And I said, that's another moment of creation where being takes the next step up, and you can see God's image in each step. So it is incarnational in a sense. I think God wrote his image into each one of these steps, most significantly in man, because in Genesis, he says, let us make man in our image 3 times. And, we bear his image, and I guess he would say that's consciousness, but they are these incarnational creation moments that bear God's image, and God's image is in more than just man. It's in literally everything. And I like how he saw it, a little bit different than how I saw it, but I like that emphasis.
So the way just listening to you just now, it kind of something clicked in my head where I was telling you I have this sort of theological resistance about in this conflict in my own mind, thinking about myself as incarnation and Christ as incarnation. But this whole time we're talking about this process being fractal and happening on all these levels and repeating the patterns, repeating in nature. And so it just occurs to me that the fact that I am the incarnation or an incarnation or whatever you want to put it, it doesn't necessarily conflict with Christ being a different level, like the next level, like a different thing entirely. But we're following in the same pattern. So my heart is feeling a little bit at ease now. So thank you for that, Brian. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
I would say that's his desire, is that we become literally just like Christ. I mean, not like you'll ever be God. Well, in my sense, I don't think you'll ever be God, but you become so close to it that it'd be hard to tell the difference if someone looked upon you in your full state of glory, in heaven.
Yeah. All right. I do have a couple more to read just to close this out. All right. He said just two more. He says, it will not be long before the new sphere finds its eyes. Okay.
Yeah.
So similar.
What did you think of that?
Boy, so just to give some context, I thought when he said new sphere that it was relating to that Greek word nous, N-O-U-S, which seems like it means something like mind, the way that Plato uses it.
I was thinking Plato right there too. That's funny. I'll comment after you're done. I'll comment.
So the idea of the new sphere is like, he talks about the sphere of the biosphere and the geosphere, right? So you have the sphere of the earth and the sphere of life, and he talks about the new sphere being another level of that, a whole new realm of being, let's say, and it's one that's an internal one. It's one of mind and consciousness. So this new sphere is. This is what I think, I mean, you correct me if you think differently, but the new sphere, I think, is what he's talking about driving towards Omega. It's not us as human beings in a physical body. It's something within us that's converging. It's some mental component, some conscious component or spirit component that's converging in some higher direction. So I think that center of centers idea, which I can't help but understand to be God, are the eyes that are looking out through this thing. And that reminds me, I don't want to get too far off topic, but it reminds me of Meister Eckhart. Do you know Meister Eckhart?
I need to read his books. I know of him. Yeah, I know who he is.
Well, I
haven't read him yet.
I won't diverge too much, but I've read some of his sermons. I've done some podcasts on it. And one of the famous things he says is, the eyes through which I see God are the same eyes through which God sees me.
Yeah, I have heard that. That's beautiful.
Buddy. So that's all the associations that come to my mind when I read that the eyes of the new sphere are going to be the person, the center of centers that exists in this conglomeration of mind that we're all striving towards. I don't know if that makes any sense, but go ahead.
Yeah, your turn. So it brought up Plato's cave to me, where I think we talked about this before, but in Plato's cave, basically you have this allegory of these prisoners trapped looking at shadows and firelight, and that's all they know. And he talks about, what if you released one and he turned around, saw the fire for the first time, saw the real objects instead of just their shadows. This is new level of seeing. And then what if they went one step further and they walked out into the sun and they saw reality as it is in the light of the sun? And then the final step is to look directly into the sun. And it's hard because he's talking about, the levels of reason, using your reason, things you can only know through reason. So what does it mean to look directly at the sun? We've already emerged from animal instinct to human consciousness. And Teilhard's talking about this new sphere that's converging and is going to find its eyes. But I'm like, to me, that sounds like Plato's cave dweller staring into the sun for the final ascent, but it's above reason. So I don't know what that would be. So we know how to use our reason to see, but when the cumulative new sphere of all human consciousness finds its eyes, what does that mean? I don't know. That's something cool to think about. But again, he's vague, so I don't know what it would mean.
He does say something in the book about, I can't quite remember exactly what it was, but something like there's always more to see. So so as consciousness becomes more sophisticated and our nervous systems become more complex, that we're continually seeing more of the reality that's before us. It's like an endless thing. And that fits exactly with the point that you just made. If the new sphere finding his eyes is the veil being torn down and being able to see yet more, being able to see the truth of what reality is or consciousness is, that we're blind to now. I love it, man. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty exciting.
I think I have one more to wrap this one up, and it is pretty interesting.
Okay.
The kingdom of God is a prodigious biological operation, that of the redeeming incarnation. The kingdom of God is a biological operation, that of the redeeming incarnation. What do you make of that?
Again, I think he's saying what you said. There's incarnational moments on every level of matter, of every level of the Earth's development, on every level of life, biology, humanity, consciousness. I think he's seeing the kingdom of God in the world around him and in science. And I personally love that. I mean, that's exactly what I'm looking at as well.
Yeah. The kingdom of God is a biological operation, man. So like, it makes me think of, and I'm not super up on scripture where I can like pull passages off the top of my head for the most part, but, and I do read a lot of the other non-canonical, like the Gospel of Thomas is a particular favorite of mine. So I don't know if this is there or in the other Gospels, but when they speak of the kingdom of God, they say things like the kingdom of God is at hand. The Gospel of Thomas says the kingdom of God is within and without, it's both. So I never would, like, it struck me as like, almost kind of like knocked me sideways. The kingdom of God is a biological operation. Like I always thought of the kingdom of God as a spiritual thing.
Right. Same.
And,
Same. That's what I always thought of it as. But when I wrote my book, my eyes were open to, and this is kind of a Catholic idea where we believe in the sacraments, right? So we believe at Mass, the priest is taking bread and it's becoming the actual flesh and blood of Jesus. So you're taking something material, and in a sacrament, the water at baptism, the bread at Mass becomes supernatural. Like it has a supernatural effect. And I almost feel like when you look at biology and the world this way, it's almost a sacramental way of looking at the world, that the miracles are in the world around you, just as much as they are spiritual. So you have to include the biology and the physical world in the kingdom of God. So I like that emphasis. I would say it's both spiritual and biological, but yeah, I don't think a lot of people look at it that way. So I think it's a helpful exercise for people.
Yeah, that fits the whole within and without theme of the book. Like neuroscientists will say it differently. They'll say there's what do they call it? Like a material correlate to a psychic phenomenon. There's always something in matter that corresponds to the thing in spirit, or they wouldn't say spirit, they would say in psyche or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's the truth. And go ahead and see like you have something to say.
Like what he was saying about the nervous system is how you track this phenomenon of life in the body. You see the nerves and the brain is growing, and you have to say man is body and soul. So there has to be material components that go along with the spiritual, and they can't be separated. And we believe in death. They're separated for a time, but that's not how they're supposed to be, and that they're going to come back together in the final, I guess, the new world, the Omega point. They're going to come back together.
Out of curiosity, do you take that literally or metaphorically? The resurrection of the flesh?
I take it literally. Yeah. I don't know what it'll look like, but
yeah.
I take it literally.
I don't either.
Only because I really want to emphasize that matter is sacred too. Matter is sacred. You can't be separated from it. It's not like, oh, the body's evil and my soul is pure. You are body and soul. That's why we bury people and we honor their body after they're gone. Even why people probably bury their dog and keep them close. Like there's something about the physical incarnation of whatever it is, the soul, the instinct, that is still sacred. And I don't think you should separate them. I think it leads to an unhealthy theology.
Wow, I couldn't agree more. One of these weird phenomena that I've experienced since I had that mystical experience, it's kind of like a meditative, prayerful thing where I'll be driving. Yeah, and I'm just looking at the trees on both sides of the road, and maybe like the birds flying over and whatever, and I just get this overwhelming sense of this is what God's doing. Like God's doing this, and I don't mean God's doing this. I mean God's being this. Like this is all God, and I can continually remind myself of that. Like this is all God. And when you said that there's something sacred about matter, that is true, and it's so often forgotten, especially because in the realm of science we so intentionally remove the spiritual component, and that's what we're studying is strictly the matter, and the matter, is barren of anything numinous. That's how we want to convince ourselves.
But scientists still find that wonder. That's why I titled my book "The Call of Wonder," because in the matter, even if you just study the matter, little plug, even if you just study the matter, it still gives you this wonder that hits your something deeper within you. Like there is God in it somehow. And I feel like that's a natural response even for the atheist. And I think they would even admit that they experience wonder when they look at the stars or the birds.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
I want to talk about this idea. This is a mythological idea. It's called the Ouroboros. Are you familiar with this symbol? It's a symbol, goes back to ancient Egypt. It's of a serpent swallowing its tail.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've seen that.
But it's supposed to represent something that's self-created, and this is why it's an image of God. It's the thing it's born from its own self. It's self-created.
Ah, gotcha.
And yeah, there was a movie when I was a kid. I don't know if you're familiar with it, The Never-Ending Story. You remember this movie?
Yeah.
I
Trey, you?
Oh yeah, thank you, sir. So the
I'm that same
Oran.
generation.
Okay, appreciate that, man. I'm trying to get my girls to watch it. I have a 9 and a 6
I got mine to watch it. They watched it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Mine watched the first 15 minutes of it, and they were like, "Nope, I'm out." So I'm trying. But the reason I bring it up is the Oran, the snake, the coiled up snake on the book, on the Never-Ending Story, is a form of the Ouroboros. The yin and the yang symbol, I probably just should call it the yin yang symbol. It's also a form of the Ouroboros. So you have this idea of the union of opposites. It's a paradoxical idea. It's like, what does it mean? What does it mean to unify the opposites? You said something about earlier about love and trying to complete yourself by coming together with your wife or something, like we're seeking that. This is the idea of the union of opposites. And it's not obvious. Like if you take -5 and you put it together with +5, you kind of end up with nothing. Mm-hmm. Or if you take all the colors of the rainbow and you put them together, you kind of end up with no color at all. So that there's something paradoxical about this idea of the union of opposites. And I think that God, the mystery of God, is a paradoxical idea, and you have to come to grips with that. It's not a logical thing. It's something that is in some ways beyond logic. It's paradoxical. And I picked up on this from Chardin, where he's talking about this whole alpha and omega thing, where he talks about consciousness somehow pre-existing and driving the process of evolution. But the whole process of evolution is designed to bring about the thing that's driving the process of evolution. You see what I mean?
I do.
So you have this Ouroboros idea. And there was a couple of pieces from this that I wanted to run by you, because I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you are or not, but I love that guy. And I read his book, Maps of Meaning, and it was like transformational for me. But I learned about a guy named Jean Piaget from Jordan Peterson, who was a developmental psychologist. And I didn't read his stuff. So I'm just sort of like maybe coming across as like I know something about it. I don't, but I know this quote because Jordan uses it over and over again. And it came to my mind in a couple of places. So I just want to read to you two little lines here that reminded me of Piaget, and then I'll give you the line from Piaget. So Chardin says, "Far from being mutually exclusive, the universal and the personal culminate simultaneously in each other." The universal and the personal, opposites. They culminate.
The one and the many, yeah.
The one and the many.
Yeah.
They culminate simultaneously in each other. That's because they're one and many, right? I love it. Okay. One more little one. He says, "Man, the center of perspective, is at the same time the center of construction of the universe." And this is really what...
Read that again. Read that one again.
Man, the center of perspective, is at the same time the center of construction of the universe. So man is the center of construction of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, first of all, what do you make of that?
It's
How
awesome.
do you make sense of that?
I mean, it's the ancient question of the one and the many. And to me, I'm going to get religious again. To me, I want to write a book on this, on the Trinity as the structure of the universe. And so you have the problem of the one and the many for centuries, but the idea that you're seeking unity, that all things are one in God and God is perfectly one. And then all of a sudden Christianity throws at you, no, God's three persons in one. And you have this massive mystery that is literally, you can't figure it out. It makes sense sort of, but it doesn't. So God is three persons, but perfectly one. And in God, you have that dynamic of the one and the many that's in the Trinity, in what the pre-existent source of everything that I believe everything's patterned after: biology, geology, the cosmos, our minds, us. So I feel like that's the foundation of the world, is the one and the many, and the mystery of how they're together. That's the foundation of reality, because that's what the Trinity is. And so everything bears that mystery. Everything desires to be like it and to be one, but we're many. So we're universal and personal. But I think it's all stemming from the Trinity, from that.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That whole Trinity thing, so I remember kind of blowing your mind a little bit when I tried to connect that idea to the observer effect from quantum physics the last time we talked.
Yeah. My mind is still blown. Mind is still blown.
Chill on that for a little while. But so this whole idea of how did he put it? He said the universal and the personal culminate in each other, and then he says that man is the center of construction of the universe. So this is what John Piaget did. John Piaget, he was a developmental psychologist, so he studied children, and he tried to observe how they develop, how their psyche develops, and how their behavior develops over time. He studied things like how they play and the rules they come up with, and all kinds of interesting stuff. And after a lifetime of studying, he says this. He says, knowledge does not begin in the eye. Now, by this, he doesn't mean the eyeball. He means like the subject, right? The knowledge doesn't begin in the eye, and it does not begin in the object. It begins in the interactions. Then there is a reciprocal and simultaneous construction of the subject on one hand and the object on the other. So Chardin says that the man is the center of the construction of the universe, and that the universal and the personal culminate simultaneously in each other. And John Piaget, who studied human beings his whole life and how they develop, says subject and object are reciprocal and simultaneously created.
So he's saying our knowledge of the universe and our knowledge of each other only occurs when we interact, when the eye interacts with the object or the subject or the other subject.
We only exist in the interaction with the world, and the world only exists because of its interaction with us. Something like that. It's like we're. I usually put this. I say that we're mutually counterdependent.
But does he mean being? Like your being doesn't exist unless you interact, or does he mean knowledge of the knowledge of being?
Yeah, he seems to be knowledge of, but I'd like to take it. I'd like to take it.
Yeah, we don't. I don't know if I can take it to we don't exist until we interact. But yeah, I mean,
but there's something about the observer effect to be said in there too, and the role consciousness plays in collapsing the wave function and all of this business.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about love, but I feel like I'm driving too much to this conversation. Anything else on your mind, or any direction you want to take it before I just hog it all?
No, I think it's been phenomenal, and I have more to think about now, but no, I don't have anything pressing that I'm thinking of right now. So keep going.
Okay. And also, forgive me, I did not ask you how much time you had. I just jumped right into this. So I want to be sensitive to that too.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So we're like an hour 14 in right now. So
okay.
We can wrap it up with a couple of other things. So love is something that he brings up. And before I start reading, because I do want to read a little passage, before I do that, This is the impression I got when he started talking about love, because he talked about love, bringing people together, bringing things together. But he talks about it almost in a cosmic sense as well.
Right. Right.
Um, Almost like when he talks about, I don't know, let's say gravity or chemical bonds, right?
Mhm.
Like these are different levels of the same thing we call love.
Mhm.
They bring things together. Like gravity brings things together. This chemical interaction bonds these atoms together or whatever. And that's the same thing that we experience in love and bringing us together. So you have, again, this fractal thing happening where you have
Mhm.
this pattern of a force that's unifying in the cosmos. And whether you call it gravity on one level or love at another, it's the same thing.
Mhm.
So I
I
don't know
love
if you have
yeah,
any.
I love how he always takes human experience. I think he called himself a phenomenologist, where he's
Yeah.
focused on human experience. So I love how he takes our human experience and shows you that pattern in biology and in, like you said, gravity and space, whatever. So you're seeing like these primal forms of love in physics and in
Yes.
biology. Um, I love that. I think, and it goes with your fractal pattern where it just keeps repeating, but also ascending, right? So you're not just repeating infinitely, but you're also ascending in, I don't know, what you call it quality. Like it's a
Yeah.
better quality Christian human love than gravity in a sense. I guess it's a more noble or a higher. So I like how he shows that order to the universe, but also shows the repeating pattern. I
Right.
relate with that. I like
Yeah,
that.
and he would say that that like primordial matter, rocks and dust floating around in space, are they're conscious, or their consciousness is in them, but it's so simple. Their exterior, their outside, is so
Yeah.
simple that the consciousness can express itself much in the rock, and it only gets more able to do so more and more as we get more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And so love can only act on the space dust in the form of gravity, in the form of something bringing it together into a
Hmm.
conglomerate. But
Hmm.
we are so much more sophisticated than a rock that when that force acts on us, it's romantic love, it's brotherly love, it's all of these various things. So let me read you the statement about love here. He says this: if there was no real internal propensity to unite, even at a rudimentary level, indeed in
Mm.
the molecule itself, it would be physically impossible for love to appear higher up with us. We should assume its presence in everything that is. Got hair
Oh,
stand up.
yeah.
Dri- Driven by the forces of love, the fragments of the world seek each other so that the world may come into being. This is no metaphor, and it's much more than poetry. A little more, a little more. He says, whether as a force or a curvature, the universal gravity of bodies is merely the shadow of that which really moves nature.
Wow.
Love is nothing more and nothing less than the physical convergence of the universe upon itself. So, so yeah. So, firstly, that last line, the
Hmm.
physical convergence of the universe upon itself. This is another, in my mind, another allusion to feedback. We talked about
Hmm.
the
Oh yeah.
fractal nature of reality. It's caused
100%.
by feedback
Yeah.
converging on itself. That's feedback, baby.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll stop for a second. I have some things I want to contrast this with, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah. What do you
So
have on that?
what that reminds me of, which blew my mind when I was researching my book, a guy named Dr. Martin Novak, who's an evolutionary biologist at Harvard, and he wrote a book called Super Cooperators. And I spoke with him for a while, and for 20 years, what he's researched and other people have found is that when we think of evolution, the process of evolution, we think of natural selection, right? The offspring mutate and then the environment weeds you out. So you have genetic variation and natural selection. And it seems like a violent process of these iterations that just get killed, knocked out, suffer,
Yeah.
die. But he said there's actually a third dynamic at work that is more powerful than those two, and it's cooperation. And he said at every level of life, things have to cooperate or it won't move forward. And it's exactly what you're talking about and what I think Teilhard's talking about, seeing love in biology and in geology or in cells, but he talks about how, certain cells have to voluntarily die for the other in order
Mm.
to give food for that one. Or the example of the trees in the forest is what I wrote in my book. They're finding out that trees have a way of communicating through their roots, and they can, if their leaves are being eaten by insects, they can release a chemical to warn other trees that the insects are coming, and those trees pump bitter chemicals so the insects won't want to eat them. So
Mm.
they cooperate in order to advance. And I found it just fascinating where you see rudimentary forms of love in the animal kingdom and in the
Uh,
cells. And he said that that's a more powerful force and it's more necessary than variation and natural selection from the environment. So you do see it. And the scientists, I think, are discovering it more and more that God's written that into life itself.
I love that. You bring up natural selection, and I'm afraid I may have to veer off in one slightly different direction and circle back to love, because he said something about natural selection in the book that
Yeah.
we should probably at least mention.
Okay.
He said that, well, we talked a little bit about evolution starting to act on thoughts and on the mind. And then he says that we essentially take over, or we have the opportunity to take over the process of natural selection. He even says that the universe has created us such that we can now do that. And so rather than so much of this blind groping, we can now take control. And I don't know if you remember this, but he said in the centuries to come, we need to come up with a nobly human form of eugenics.
I do remember that line. I
like,
I reread it a couple of times. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one of the reasons he was banned.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know what he means by this. It's hard for me to imagine what he means by that.
Well, I'm thinking of invention, like we talked about earlier, right? You see natural selection, and I guess in a sense, when you are creating an invention and you're iterating through failures, we do have the power now to do that. I don't remember if you talked about like genetically engineering children like we do now, where you can sort of apply natural selection at will if you want to and kind of play God in that sense. But that's what comes to
Well,
mind when you say that.
right. I mean, suppose that there were, and there must be, physical things that will allow
Mhm.
us to enhance our own consciousness and whatever that might mean. And we have the ability through CRISPR or whatever it is, gene editing, to create human beings that are closer to this omega, or are able to advance beyond where nature has allowed us to advance. Do we have some kind of interest in doing that? Do we have some kind of responsibility to do that? Like, it's a scary thing for me to consider, because people make mistakes, and with any new technology, things are not going to go well. Look at the early plastic surgery in like the 70s. It's terrible. Like,
Yeah. What's funny
So
is he
anyway.
also wrote this right during World War II. I mean,
He
this
sure
was in the
did.
1940s. So I don't know. I mean, you can definitely see where it goes wrong. It's probably what he means by a nobler.
Yeah.
But again, he leaves it vague where you don't know exactly what he means. And that's where I wish he would kind of explain further, but I guess that would take volumes.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I just didn't want to let that go unsaid.
Yeah.
So going back to this love thing, I want to bring up a couple of other people who talk about this. One of them is a little bit weird. I don't know if I brought it up to you before. What's the guy's name? Walter Russell. Walter Russell is a philosopher, I suppose.
Okay.
He was. If you look him up, you'll find out that he has some very strange theories. Like, he created a new periodic table that was designed in like a spiral pattern, and he claimed that the periodic table we have is wrong, because it should follow a musical pattern, and you can see where the octaves are missing, and so there must be something missing here, and it's very, very strange. I only learned about him because I was watching Joe Rogan doing an interview with Terrence Howard, the actor Terrence Howard.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
If you haven't seen that one, you should go watch that one. It was amazing.
I've seen some clips. Yeah. He's got some interesting ideas.
Well, so Walter Russell was one of the guys that was an inspiration to Terrence Howard, and why he was talking the way he was.
Okay.
But anyway, I read one of his books, and let me just read you what Walter Russell says.
Okay.
He says, "At times, the solitary one grows out of the many. At times, the many out of the one. Separation engenders union through love. the one born out of the many separating out from the one. The interchange is a ceaseless round. And he says, thinking is the cause of motion. All motion is oscillatory, swinging between two apparently opposing forces, gravitation and repulsion, which are respectively electric and magnetic. These two forces are the father-mother forces of mind. So he's what he's literally doing here, Brian, is he's saying that all of physics is driven by electricity and magnetism, electromagnetism. And one force is an attracting force and one force is a repelling force. They're actually just one force, by the way. Electromagnetism is just one force, but one of them is going to push you away and create the many, and the other force is going to bring you together and create the one. But he specifically, if you listen to it in the beginning, he says, separation engenders union through love, the one born out of the many. So he literally speaks of the force that attracts us as being love. So he talks about it very much like Chardin does, where there's a physical corollary to some sort of numinous reality, and in the physical world, it's gravity or magnetism, and in the psychic world, that force is love. So he makes this connection, just like Chardin does, between love and these forces in nature that bring us together.
Yeah.
And then another one is we're going to go back to 400s BC. We're going to go back to a fellow named Empedocles, who I don't know if you've ever delved into any of the pre-Socratics or Empedocles, but very interesting guy. He believed, he's the guy that all of these pre-Socratic philosophers believed that they had theories about what the elements of nature were. So you hear these things like earth, water, fire, ether, that kind of thing.
Right.
Empedocles believed that. He said that the world is made of immutable elements, earth, air, water, fire. But he goes a step further. He says these elements are operated upon by two opposing forces, love and strife. Okay, and he says combined and dispersed to produce in alternating phases the harmonious one and the divergent many. So love brings us together, strife pushes us apart. It's all about the one and the many. So going back to 400 BC, going to the 1920s or whatever it was with Walter Russell and Pierre de Chardin, we have the same pattern. So it's not like a new idea necessarily. It's kind of an ancient idea.
No, it makes me think of a lot of different things. The first thing that came to mind was the Hegelian dialectic, with the idea that you have to put an idea out. Someone has to argue it. I think Plato and Aristotle, throwing ideas about the forms and disagreeing. And it's in that argument that you arrive at this new synthesis of truth. And then the process starts again. And you kind of, through strife and through natural selection of ideas, you arrive at sort of a better idea. I'm thinking of that, but I'm also thinking of just the human propensity to find patterns everywhere we go. Like, we're a rational being, but it does appear that the world is rational. And when you're understanding, I guess, how love correlates with gravity, that's, I don't know. I feel like it just shows that it's a proof of God to me. There has to be something rational behind reality, or things wouldn't have patterns. Things wouldn't make sense, just in the very general sense, the general idea, like you couldn't have these discussions if we didn't have a rational basis underlying reality. That's the two thoughts that pop in my head when you read those.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the way you just described the Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah,
this is why these sorts of things are so fun for me, man. The dialogos that we're doing right now.
Yeah.
I never like when you were doing it with your hands too, and it was all coming together in my mind. So you've got a synthesis, or what is it? Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right?
Yeah.
And when you were doing that, I was thinking the many becoming the one. I had never considered that before, and it's just another reflection of that same pattern in the realm of thought, in the realm of consciousness.
It's which Chardin would agree with, right? It's just that ongoing evolution of the noosphere, that we're arriving somewhere, we're heading somewhere, convergence point.
Listen, man, I think I agree with you. We're pretty much lockstep on this thing. I think the God Omega point stuff is a little bit vague, and I wish there was some more substance to it. But
Mhm.
I'm just going to comfort myself by saying that's the religious mystery, and you can only speculate so far.
Right.
And that's why I think I was like, is Omega Point just yet another beginning? Is it a new phylum? Is it the branch of a new tree that's going to continue? Because that's a possibility. And the truth is, we don't know if the culmination is the ultimate end or permanent end, or if it's a new beginning, or what that means. But yeah, I think you and I are on the same page there. A dry middle, a fantastic end, theological problems in there, but that was the interesting stuff to me.
Yeah. Man, did you want to talk about the problems that I think the church had with him?
100%. Yes, let's hear it.
So I didn't look it up on purpose because I wanted to see if I could figure out what the issues were. And I know one of the issues is probably, I think the word is called epiphenomenon. The soul is an epiphenomenon, where one thing the church says you can't believe is that the soul evolves, that it has to be a special creation placed in man at the moment of your birth. And he makes it sound like the soul of consciousness, but again, it's vague, is evolving. And like you said, there's instincts in animals. Like that's a type of the human soul in a primordial form and even further back in the cells. So I think that might be one of the issues that he had. But I wonder if another one is what we're talking about, where it almost sounds like a pantheism, where when we reach the omega point, we become God. And like all of us together at our highest form are God. I wonder if that's part of it too, but I'm going to go look it up after this and see what he was
Yeah,
actually.
no, that's good. No, he does bring up pantheism twice that I saw in towards the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, I imagine that's probably something, because the Christian theology requires God to be transcendent.
Yeah.
And if God is the cosmos, he can't be outside of the cosmos, and there's a problem there.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I saw something when I was reading the wiki, though. It said he made some statement about original sin, and
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. So go
go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah. No, I was just
I
saying,
was
I couldn't detect where that was in here. So you tell me.
I didn't really see it in there, but it's one of the, I know that just from my own studies that is probably the main problem with, if you go by evolution only, that the church is going to have. So the church says Adam and Eve were our first parents, and all of humanity is descended from two people. But DNA studies and science show us that we probably came from a group of thousands. So if you break off from just one parent sinning, original sin means we inherited the sin from Adam and Eve, but it comes through birth. It comes through your physical birth. So if you have a group of thousands, then they would all have to fall. Or I don't know how it would work, but that is a current problem in evolutionary theology right now. I know, and so maybe he took the side of, we need to rethink original sin because of science. And I could see that happening. And I know the church is looking into it a lot more now, and they're a lot more open probably than they were in the 1940s to talking
Yeah.
about it. But that's definitely probably something. Now I'm going to go look it up, and I'm going to send you this last epilogue. I'm going to find the link, because you're going to find it fascinating, because he
Yeah.
addresses a lot of these problems that I guess people launched at him. And it does clarify a little bit of his views.
Yeah, I would love to have been a fly on the wall for the reaction to this at the time. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but I am thinking, like, as far as evolutionary theory goes, I'm not up on it to any degree necessarily, but I do know that there's still an ongoing debate about the out of Africa model, and then there's
Yeah.
a multi-regional model that used to be prevalent. Because there were so many of these ancient fossils they were finding in Asia and East Asia.
All over
Yeah.
pretty quickly after if it did come out of Africa, they moved pretty fast.
So that's an interesting point. If modern humans developed in East Africa, and they also developed simultaneously in East Asia, well, one of those populations is descended from Adam, and one of them isn't. Like, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't really thought of that.
Another idea that goes with that I think about a lot is, if you really came from one couple, would there have been hominins that looked human? They were so close to being human, but they're just the level of animal. They don't have a human soul, but you're living among them. And could that count for the interbreeding of people with them? And, I don't know.
Mm,
It goes to a lot
yeah.
of speculation, but I like speculation. I like speculating
Oh
on
yeah,
what could have
it's
happened.
fun.
It's more fun.
Do you think that the point that I kept emphasizing throughout this conversation about the incarnation being applied more liberally, how you couldn't apply it more liberally if you wanted to than to say that the cosmos is the incarnation? I don't know that. I mean, I guess that is in some ways pantheism, but I'm making a distinction here and saying that what the Catholic Church's objection might have been, same thing that Kyle's objection is to me when I have this conversation with him is, no, you're not Jesus, you're not the incarnation, knock it off. That if he's suggesting that incarnation is ubiquitous, like what Jesus was, everything is everything that's been, everything that will be, everything that is now. And so if you suggest such a thing, the church loses its authority, right?
Yeah. Well, truth is in the distinctions, these tiny distinctions. And if you look at all the church councils, I mean, these are like, they're talking about tiny little, the schism of 1054. Does the Holy Spirit process from the Father alone, or does it process from both the Father and the Son? And that broke the church in half. Things like these little distinctions that most people never think about. And I find those fascinating. I would say you're onto something, that the incarnation can be seen everywhere. I wouldn't know what the proper distinctions are within there, but I mean, truth is everywhere. Christianity believes everything. The Father made all of creation for the Son and in the Son. Why wouldn't it bear their image? Why wouldn't it, why wouldn't we feel like the Son when we're brought into the family? So there's something there. I just don't know the distinctions well enough to make a good argument.
Yeah. Yeah. Always to be a fly on the wall. What else, Brian? You got anything else on this topic?
No, man. I think that was awesome. Right. We need to read another book.
Yeah. Listen, I told you I have another Chardin book. I don't know. I don't know.
Not another Chardin book. Let's move on to a new one.
Yeah, let's see.
One that you.
I don't know. You know what? I have one on my list that I picked up. I'm very curious about. It's called Mind and Matter, and it's by Erwin Schrödinger. Okay. So it's a tiny little book. It's not big. It was written by one of the founders of quantum physics, and it's not about quantum physics. It's not mathematical, or it's about mind and matter. I think it's going to be. I haven't cracked it open yet, but I think it's going to be something along the lines of, what the implications are of consciousness in physics, and I think it's going to border on religion. That's honestly what I'm hoping for. So I don't know what I'll get to, but we should definitely. I would love to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your plan? I mean, are you going to be writing another book? I know you kind of alluded to that. Anything in the near term on your radar?
Yeah, I got book 2 outlined, and book 3, I know what I want to write about. So book 1 was about wonder, which is kind of the experience of seeing God in science, in the universe, using your intellect. Book 2 is going to be about the experience of peace, how to achieve peace by the will, like choosing God. How do you choose him? How do you experience him in just everyday life? So it's going to be more about experience, the experience of God, which I'm going to center around peace, because Jesus mentions peace so many times in the Bible. And I think that's the number one. I would say more than, it's just an easier term to express what I'm trying to get across than happiness or love or joy. I think peace is a better, I guess, cumulative word for it. So I'm gonna focus on that. I have that outlined, and then the third book I want to write is going to be a meditation on what real power looks like. Like, what does power look like? And I don't know, how does some of these people just seem to influence the world by not doing a lot? Like, the American mindset is just hyper production. I have to make it happen. I have to will it and force it. But you look at Gandhi or Mother Teresa, they changed the world by being. And you see that in Jesus in the crowning with thorns. I have that image in my office, the crowning with thorns, where it's called Ecce Homo, behold the man. And it's this meditation for me on what power looks like. He's influencing, changing the whole world, but he's this victim, and he's not striving. He's not, I don't know. It's fascinating to me. So those are my next 2 endeavors.
I love it. I would suggest, if this isn't already on your radar, at least for research purposes, there's an Eastern idea that comes from Taoism. I think maybe it's called Wu Wei, but it's just like action through inaction. It's all about Yeah. So yeah, there's probably some good stuff there to add to that project.
Will you send it to me? Will you send me that
Yeah.
book you're thinking about?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, keep us posted on the second book. I'll definitely read it and do another podcast on it, like I did the first
Awesome.
one.
That'd be great.
I encourage everyone to check out the Call of Wonder episode that I did, and that you can find Brian. What is it? BrianCranley.com.
BrianCranley.com. Yeah, The Call of Wonders on Amazon and bookshop.org and Goodreads.
Yep, I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in the book. Brian, listen, man, I really appreciate it. We went almost 2 hours again, so I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate just finding somebody, a like-minded person who was as excited and interested to have these sorts of conversations. There's not very many of us out there, so I appreciate
I feel the same way. There's not many people I could talk to about this stuff that are actually interested. So,
I am. This was great, man. I'm going to play the outro music and just hang with me for one minute here.
Okay.
Well, there you have it. That's one avenue explored, but infinitely more still to go. I hope you enjoyed thinking along with us. I know. It's not easy work. Thinking. It's hard and full of uncertainties, but I'm grateful for the company as we trek through this together. Here's to hoping that the juice is worth the squeeze. See what I did there? Let's find out together in the next episode.